Let's understand how to work with text. There are several properties and methods you can use when working with strings, and I'm going to show you the most important ones. So let's use a console.log statement, and let's say we want to have the length of our text. So let's use short text.length to access the length property. And now once we save the file and we're going to run the file, we can see that we have 32 characters. So this string basically contains 32 characters. So let's imagine I want to access the first character of a string, and I can do so by using the index notation. So basically by using the bracket notation. So we're going to say that we want to access short text. Now we use the brackets, and now let's say we want to get the first character. And when using JavaScript, counting does not start from 1, but it starts from 0. So our first character has the index of 0. Now we're going to save this and we're going to console.log this. And as you can see, we now have an age. So now let's say we want to have the second character, which has the index of 1. Age is 0, E is 1. So now we should get the character E inside of the console. And as you can see, we get E inside of the console. Now let's say we maybe want to have the S right here. So we are going to start here, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and S should be 16. So let's see if this works. We're going to run the code, and as you can see, we're getting an S. So this is basically how counting in JavaScript works, and understanding how counting in JavaScript works is not just important with strings, but with pretty much everything. So just keep that in mind. So let's imagine we wanted to transform this text to uppercase. Then we can just go ahead and use the .toUppercase method by doing so. And every time you access a property, you're just going to write it like this. And if you want to use a method, you're going to use opening and closing brackets. And if you're using VS Code, you'll also get an indication right here if you're going to hover over the property or method, whether this is a property or a method. And as you can see, we have this method indicator right here. So we know for sure that to lowercase, for example, is a method. So let's use to lowercase. And if you hover over the method again, you get an indication right here, which says that this is a method, which tells you, okay, I need to use bracket. As you can see, we now have everything in lowercase, which does not change too much because only our age basically had a capital letter. But yeah, so let's do the exact opposite. And let's say we want to have to uppercase, for example, because right here we should really see a change. We're going to run the code, and as you can see, we now have everything being uppercase. We can also use .includes to check if a substring exists, for example. So let's just go ahead and use .includes, and now we can define the substring we are searching for. So let's see if we have this inside of our short text, for example. We are going to run this and we are getting true because this obviously exists. Now let's say this, for example, we're going to save this, we're going to run the code, and now we're getting false because this with two S's does not exist. The index of method, for example, gives you the index of a certain substring, for example. So let's say we want to get the index of this. We're going to save the file, run the code, and index 5 is basically the index of this because we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. If we want to slice out a part of a string, we can use the slice method by defining a start and an end index, for example. So let's say we want to use slice and we want to get the word this, for example. Then we're going to start at letter 5 and we're going to go up to 6, 7, 8, and let's go to 9 because the last letter is basically excluded while the first letter is included when using the slice method. So let's run the code and we're getting this. Substring is pretty similar to slice. We're going to run the code, and as you can see, we're getting the exact same result. We can also say that we want to use replace, for example, and we can say we, for example, want to replace this instead of our text with bro, for example. And now we're going to save this and we get, hey bro, is my short text, yup. And obviously this mustn't make too much sense, but as you can see, this kind of works. We can also use the split method to split a string into an array, for example. So we are going to use the split method right here, and let's define a character where we want the split to happen. So let's say every time we have a space bar, we want to have a new item inside of our array. So now let's just save this. Let's run the code, and now we have this array which has a new item every time we use a space, for example. So we get an item in our array for 8, for hey, for this, for is, for my, and so on. And you don't need to understand arrays just now, but keep that in mind for later. And now let's imagine we are working with a website and we have a user who puts in like 100 white spaces at the end of our string, for example. And obviously this is nothing we want to save in our database, for example. So what we can do now is we can use the .trim method to trim the text. So basically to remove every white space from the end or from the beginning. So let's save this, let's run the code. And as you can see, we now get this text, which should not have any white space in the end. I think it's better to visualize this once we get white space in the beginning. Let's just save this, let's run the code. And as you can see, we have a lot of white space right here. And if we use our .trim method right now, and we're going to run the code again, as you can see, we now removed all of the white space from the beginning.